Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a topic that is, well, incredibly common, often misunderstood, and probably affects you, me, almost everyone we know at some point. Procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not just talking about occasionally delaying something. We mean that specific kind of delay where you know it'll make things worse, but
Yeah.
you do it anyway.
Yeah, that classic thing. Maybe you're supposed to be working on a huge report,
Right.
but suddenly reorganizing your bookshelf seems like the most urgent task imaginable.
Exactly. And the sources we have for this deep dive articles, research papers, even some interesting online discussions, they really push back on that simple idea of procrastination is just laziness.
They really do. They frame it as something much more complex, a psychological phenomenon, really, with deep roots.
Absolutely. So our mission today, based on this material, is to get past that surface level. What's really going on psychologically when we procrastinate? What's the brain science saying?
And crucially, what practical strategies do these sources offer? Things we can actually do to break the habit.
Right. So how do the sources define it? Just to get us on the same page.
Well, the specific definition that comes up often is the voluntary delay of an intended action despite expecting negative consequences. It's that awareness that it's not good for you, but you delay anyway.
Voluntary delay despite negative consequences.
Yeah.
Got it. And it's common.
Oh, yeah. The numbers are pretty striking. Sources mention it chronically affects maybe 20% of adults and, get this, closer to half of college students.
Wow. Half. That's huge.
It is. And those negative consequences you mentioned, they're real. The sources link it to, well, everything from worse academic performance, financial problems, to significant impacts on emotional, mental, and even physical health. So, yeah, it's a big deal.
Okay, so it's serious, it's common. Let's
Yeah.
get into the core of why. According to the sources, what's the fundamental driver here?
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. Across the board, the research points to procrastination being primarily an emotional regulation issue.
Emotional regulation, not time management.
Not primarily, no. It's less about not knowing how to manage your time and more about the task itself triggering uncomfortable feelings. Things like anxiety, frustration, maybe boredom, self-doubt.
Resentment even.
Yeah, resentment, discomfort.
Hmm.
And you delay the task to get immediate relief from those bad feelings.
Ah, okay, so you're avoiding the feeling, not necessarily the task itself.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And this ties into how our brains are wired, right? There's some kind of internal conflict.
Precisely. The brain science often highlights this struggle between two key areas. You've got the limbic system.
The emotional part.
Right, the part geared towards immediate gratification, avoiding pain, reacting to how you feel right now. And then there's the prefrontal cortex.
That's the planner, the rational bit.
Mm.
Long-term goals, impulse control.
Exactly. And the sources suggest that when those uncomfortable emotions flare up, that impulsive, feel-good-now drive from the limbic system often just overrides the prefrontal cortex's sensible plan.
So it pushes you towards distraction or something
Right.
easier, even though you know you shouldn't.
Yeah, your rational brain knows better, but the emotional brain wants immediate comfort.
Okay, that clicks. It's not a failure of planning necessarily, but a failure of managing difficult feelings in that moment. So what specific feelings or psychological triggers do the sources point to?
Well, a huge one is fear.
Fear, like fear of,
It can be fear of failure, classic, right? If you don't really try, you can't truly fail. But also fear of inadequacy, just doubting you have what it takes. And surprisingly, sometimes even fear of success.
fear of success. How does that work?
Well, success might bring more pressure, higher expectations, maybe change things in ways you're not ready for. So avoiding the task avoids that potential outcome too.
Hmm. And fear often goes hand in hand with perfectionism, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They're tightly linked. If the task has to be perfect, the pressure can feel completely overwhelming, paralyzing, so starting seems impossible.
You avoid starting to avoid the inevitable imperfection.
Exactly. And the sources discussing this, they suggest strategies like, well, setting more realistic goals, for one, focusing on just making progress, not hitting perfection straight away.
Kind of adopting a good enough mindset.
Yes, exactly. That good enough approach, especially for getting started. And breaking big, scary tasks down into tiny, manageable steps, that's mentioned a lot.
Right, would make the first step seem really small and doable. Less likely to trigger that overwhelm.
Reduces the pressure, makes it less daunting.
Okay, so managing fear and perfectionism. What about how we think about time? The future versus now.
That connects to something the sources call present bias. or sometimes temporal discounting.
Present bias, meaning?
It's our tendency to really overvalue immediate rewards or comfort compared to larger benefits that are further away in time.
So feeling good now is more important than the future reward, or avoiding future pain.
Pretty much. When you procrastinate, you're essentially choosing short-term mood repair over the well-being of your future self, who's going to have to deal with the fallout.
It's like your future self is a stranger you don't really care about yet.
Kind of, yeah, there's this disconnect.
And if you don't even know where to start on a task, that seems like fuel for the fire.
Definitely. Lack of structure or unclear goals is a big one. If a task feels vague or overwhelming, or you just don't know what the very first concrete step is.
Your brain just stalls.
Right. There's no clear signal to start, so it's easy to just drift off and do something else. Avoidance becomes the path of least resistance.
So again, it comes back to the task itself triggering a negative feeling.
Yes, and the sources call that task aversion. Simply finding a task intrinsically boring or frustrating or anxiety-provoking. That emotional reaction to the task is a root cause, separate from just being lazy.
And what if you just fundamentally don't believe you can actually do it?
That would fall under low self-efficacy, doubting your ability, your competence to complete the task successfully.
So avoiding it protects your ego in a way.
Exactly. It protects your self-esteem from a potential failure. The sources suggest tackling this by deliberately building confidence with small wins. Start with something simple you know you can do. Succeed and let that build momentum and belief.
Incrementally build that confidence. Okay. Now, the sources also mentioned different theories trying to explain all this. Without getting lost in academic weeds, can you give us the gist?
Sure. Think of them less as competing theories and more as different angles. One angle, sometimes linked to something called temporal motivation theory, looks at it like a kind of mental calculation.
A calculation.
Yeah, like how valuable is the outcome? How likely am I to actually achieve it? How far away is that outcome? And how sensitive am I to that delay? How impulsive am I?
So we prefer rewards that are big, likely, and soon.
Exactly. And when the reward seems distant or uncertain and the effort or discomfort is right now, the motivation just plummets.
Makes sense. What's another angle?
The other main lens, as we talked about, really centers emotional regulation. It argues that the primary driver is managing those immediate negative feelings. We procrastinate to feel better now, even if it's totally counterproductive long term.
Right, the short-term mood repair.
But the sources are careful to say that no single theory probably explains all procrastination for everyone.
That's more complex than that.
Way more complex. They acknowledge that, different people procrastinate for different reasons. It might be linked to other things like ADHD, maybe depression, OCD, even past trauma, or just deep-seated beliefs about oneself.
And I saw a mention in some discussions about dopamine.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea floating around, the concept of low baseline dopamine. If your brain isn't getting enough reward signals from, like, normal, everyday tasks.
They feel boring, unrewarding.
Right. So you might seek out higher stimulation activities, avoiding the mundane stuff until the pressure builds. That intense deadline pressure becomes the strong negative feeling you're finally motivated to avoid by doing the task.
Wow. Okay. So it's clearly way more nuanced than just stop being lazy. Understanding the why is huge. But the big question remains, how do we use this understanding to actually change things? What strategies do the sources recommend?
Yeah, that's the practical part. The sources really emphasize a multi-pronged approach. It starts with trying to figure out your specific triggers.
Identifying your personal why.
Exactly. And then applying the techniques that address those causes. They cover a whole range, from simple daily habits to deeper psychological shifts.
Okay, let's start with the daily stuff. What are some basic foundational habits?
Well, planning is important, but specific kinds. Starting the day with a clear plan, tasks, priorities, and crucially, breaking tasks down.
We mentioned that. Into the smallest possible steps.
Yes. Make them seem less intimidating, easier to just start. That initial hurdle is often the biggest. Techniques like the Pomodoro method are often mentioned too.
Right. Working in focused bursts with timed breaks.
Yeah, it builds momentum, makes work feel less like an endless slog, creates structure.
And taking breaks seems counterintuitive, but it's important.
Absolutely vital, according to the sources. Regular breaks, especially involving some physical activity, even just a quick walk or some stretches, can actually boost energy and focus.
Get the blood flowing.
And also, building in time for review and reflection. At the end of the day or week, look back. What did you accomplish? What worked? What didn't? Adjust your plans. Using a journal or an app can help track this.
Makes sense. And what about managing energy?
Yeah, the sources mention reducing decision fatigue. Basically, try to tackle your most important or difficult tasks earlier in the day when your willpower and focus are generally higher. Prioritize.
So, structure, breaking things down, managing energy. What about the deeper mental game? Tackling those emotions.
This is where things like mindfulness and self-awareness come in. The sources suggest practicing being aware of the present moment, recognizing when those uncomfortable feelings or the urge to avoid pop up,
Just noticing them.
noticing them without judgment. That little bit of space allows you to choose a different response instead of automatically reacting. Mindful meditation is often cited as a way to train this mental muscle.
And actively fighting back against negative thoughts.
Yes, that's huge. Reframing thoughts. Challenging those automatic negative assumptions about a task or your ability. Instead of, I'll never finish this, maybe try, okay, I can handle the first step.
Yeah.
Using realistic, positive self-talk.
Like we discussed with perfectionism, embracing that good enough mindset.
Exactly. Letting go of the need for everything to be flawless frees you up to actually start and make progress.
And resilience. How do we bounce back when we slip up? Because we will slip up.
That's key. Building resilience, often through adopting a growth mindset, seeing setbacks not as proof you're a failure, but as, well, learning opportunities. Okay, that didn't work. What can I try differently?
The environment matters too, right?
Yeah.
Setting yourself up for success.
Big time. Creating a procrastination-free environment is crucial. That means minimizing distractions, organizing your workspace, maybe using website blockers, putting your phone on silent or in another room, having a dedicated space for work if possible.
Decluttering the physical and digital space.
And leveraging tools. Using productivity apps for task management like Todoist or Trello, or time tracking apps like Toggle can provide that external structure and accountability.
Make it easy to do the right thing, hard to do the wrong thing. What about specific tricks to just get started?
One powerful technique mentioned is setting implementation intentions.
Okay, what's that?
It's framing your plan as an if-then statement. If it is 9 a.m. on Tuesday, then I will open the report document and write one paragraph. It creates a really specific mental cue.
Takes the decision out of it in the moment.
Sort of automates it. And time blocking is similar, actually scheduling specific tasks into your calendar like appointments, not just having a vague to-do list.
Treating it like a meeting you can't miss.
Exactly. And remember self-compassion.
You mentioned that earlier. Being kind to yourself.
Yes. The research highlighted in the sources strongly suggests that self-compassion, forgiving yourself when you procrastinate, is actually more effective for getting back on track than beating yourself up. Guilt and shame often lead to more avoidance.
So forgive, learn, refocus. Don't spiral.
Precisely.
What about getting help from others?
Very important. Accountability and social support. Tell someone, a friend, partner, mentor, about your goals. Just knowing someone might ask can be a powerful motivator. Or join a group, online or offline, with similar goals. That community support helps.
Shared struggle, shared success.
And related to that, really valuing consistent incremental progress. Celebrate the small wins. Completing one small step is a victory. Acknowledge it. That positive reinforcement helps counteract the negativity often associated with the task.
Builds momentum. Now, there was a really interesting counterintuitive trick mentioned in some sources. Something about doing something harder.
Ah, yes, the science-based trick. This popped up in a few places, sometimes linked to dopamine research. The core idea is, when you're stuck procrastinating, feeling really low motivation,
Yeah.
you intentionally do something else, something unrelated, but that's actually more challenging or uncomfortable for a very short period.
Wait, make yourself more uncomfortable. Why?
The theory is that this temporary dip into an even deeper motivational trough, forcing yourself through this brief, intense discomfort, can actually trigger a rebound effect, a higher peak of motivation afterwards. It sort of resets the system.
That sounds wild. What kind of harder things are we talking about?
The examples given were things like doing really focused breathing for 3 minutes, like counting each breath precisely, which is surprisingly difficult when your mind wants to wander.
Okay.
Or doing 3 minutes of intense physical exercise, like squats or push-ups to failure, really pushing yourself.
Right.
Or the most dramatic one, perhaps, taking a cold shower, especially first thing in the morning.
A cold shower. Brr.
Yeah. And the rationale linked this to research suggesting cold exposure can significantly boost dopamine levels for hours. That dopamine surge could provide a powerful, natural motivational lift.
Wow. But they mentioned being careful with that one.
Definitely. They included a safety note if you try cold showers. Start gradually. Don't just jump into ice water. Slowly lower the temperature over time. Do it safely.
Okay, so pushing through a different, short, intense discomfort to overcome the discomfort of the task you're avoiding. That's fascinating.
It's a very different approach, isn't it? And of course, for people where procrastination is really persistent and damaging, therapy is a key recommendation.
Like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Exactly. CBT is often mentioned. A therapist can help you dig deeper into the underlying causes, challenge those really ingrained negative beliefs like, I'm just not capable, so why bother?
Right.
They can teach specific behavioral strategies tailored to you and help you develop better emotional regulation and stress management skills. Things like mindfulness, but also something called distress tolerance.
Distress tolerance. Learning to sit with discomfort.
Pretty much, learning to cope with those difficult feelings without immediately resorting to avoidance. And related to changing beliefs, one idea from the online discussions was this process. Identify a limiting belief, consciously create an empowering counterbelief, actively look for evidence supporting the new belief in your life, and just repeat that new belief over and over to try and rewire those neural pathways.
So it was a whole toolkit. Daily habits, mindset shifts, environmental changes, managing emotions, self-kindness, accountability, even these intense tricks in therapy.
It really shows that overcoming procrastination is possible, but it takes self-awareness and applying the right strategies consistently. It's not just about willpower.
Requires patience and practice, definitely.
But the sources offer a lot of hope and practical steps.
Now, before we wrap this deep dive, there was another layer in some of the sources, especially maybe in the online discussions. A slightly different perspective suggesting procrastination isn't always purely bad.
Yeah, that adds an interesting nuance. While chronic harmful procrastination is clearly a problem we need to address,
Right.
some sources propose that maybe, sometimes, a bit of mindful or strategic delay isn't the worst thing. It might even have a place.
How could delaying something possibly be good?
Well, one concept is called structured procrastination.
Structured procrastination.
The idea is you avoid doing task A, which feels important but maybe less urgent or more daunting, by actively working on tasks B, C, and D, which are also valuable, just maybe lower priority initially.
So the task you're avoiding actually motivates you to get other useful things done.
Kind of, yeah. It becomes a weirdly effective prioritization mechanism. You're still being productive, just maybe not on the thing you think you should be doing right that second.
Okay, so you're not just doom scrolling, you're actually tackling other responsibilities.
Exactly. And another idea is that sometimes a bit of delay, a bit of incubation time can actually boost creativity.
How so?
It gives your subconscious mind time to mull over the problem in the background. When you finally come back to the task, you might have fresh insights or more innovative ideas than if you just forced yourself to start immediately.
Letting it simmer. And maybe it just aligns with our natural energy cycle sometimes.
That too. Sometimes pushing through when you're genuinely exhausted or unfocused leads to subpar work anyway. Taking a strategic break, delaying until you feel sharper, might lead to better results and more efficiency in the long run.
But the key is distinguishing this from harmful avoidance.
Absolutely. The sources stress that distinction. Is the delay strategic, maybe even helpful, allowing for rest or incubation? Or is it driven purely by negative emotion, leading to stress, missed deadlines, and guilt? That's the crucial difference.
This whole deep dive has definitely shifted how I think about procrastination. It's not just laziness or poor time management at all.
No, it's so much deeper. It's about emotions, fear, brain wiring, core beliefs. It's complex.
But understanding the complexity actually makes it feel more solvable
Yeah,
because there are specific things to target.
exactly. It's not about finding some magic bullet of willpower. It's about understanding your patterns and applying these consistent strategies, breaking things down, managing thoughts, changing your environment, being kind to yourself.
Feels much more empowering framed like that.
It provides a path forward beyond just try harder.
So thinking about all this, what does it mean for you listening right now? Considering this more nuanced view that procrastination is often about avoiding difficult feelings or maybe sometimes even a form of strategic reprioritizing, what might your own procrastination habits be trying to signal? Are they highlighting specific tasks that trigger fear or anxiety you need to maybe address directly? Or could they be revealing something deeper about your priorities, maybe showing you what you truly value or perhaps what you don't value as much as you think you should?
It's definitely something worth reflecting on, isn't it? The next time you catch yourself avoiding something, what's really going on there?